In 1968, a smiling man returned home with aplomb and a song. He changed into a zippered cardigan and a pair of sneakers and welcomed children from all over into his home, regardless of their backgrounds. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, I was Mr. Rogers' neighbor. And Mr. Rogers believed that everyone was a neighbor, and he presented people with hope for a future where everyone could treat one another with kindness and love. In 1999, at a Pittsburgh interview, Mr. Rogers is talking about his childhood and what kind of led to his view of love for people. And he's talking about his mother. And whenever there was a disaster, a catastrophe in the news, she said, "Look for the helpers. They're always there on the sidelines." Mr. Rogers rephrased with, "Look for the helpers, and you will have hope." In April of 1995, I was sitting in a classroom at college, and I heard what I thought was somebody shaking the doors to the building outside. It wasn't until several hours later that I found out there had been a bombing 12 and a half miles away in downtown Oklahoma City. And when I saw the news coverage, I didn't see disaster or the destruction. What I saw were people helping one another. People that I knew didn't know what they could do to help, so they made sandwiches and brought those down to the first responders. Other people just went down to try to help dig through rubble to see if they could find survivors. When I moved to Arizona a few years later, I would tell people the story of Oklahoma as a way to explain to them how the people in Oklahoma will pull together in an emergency. They didn't believe me. People from Arizona thought I was crazy and making it up. People that had come from New York said there's no way people will do that. 6 years later, September 1st, 2001, 2 airplanes hit the World Trade Center towers. And the people in New York realized that people do come together in an emergency. That people dressed in suits that would just as soon curse you out the day before were running into the dust and the debris and into the danger to try to help other people. In 2005, a hurricane caused severe flooding in New Orleans, and a lot of people were displaced from their homes. You might remember the news coverage of all the people that were in the big stadium in Texas because they had nowhere else to go. Well, several of those people found people that would take them into their homes, some of them here in Oklahoma. One of my friends that's here in Oklahoma came from that, ended up relocating here as a result of that. But being a neighbor, being a helper to people isn't limited to the United States. When the Civil War really erupted in Syria, the government was not quick to respond whenever they bombed a neighborhood to go and help dig people out of the wreckage. So a group of civilians got together and started the White Helmets. And these White Helmets, whenever there's a bombing or an emergency, they'll go in to try to rescue people. They deliver medical supplies and other needed necessities to areas where the government isn't going to provide for people. And they're helping people to evacuate from those areas that are dangerous. So, people all over the world can be good neighbors for one another. They can be heroes to those just by being helpers. So whenever you see a disaster, look on the sidelines. Look at the helpers, and you will have hope. But more importantly, if you want to be one of those helpers, you can provide someone else with hope. Mr. Toastmaster.